2,921 pounds of gold, 5,100 pounds of silver. That is what a single sheet of numbers claims is buried in the ground of Bedford County, Virginia. And for more than 140 years, nobody has been able to say where. Many people will tell you the whole thing is a hoax. They may be right. But every version of the hoax case collides with one fact it cannot explain. That fact is waiting at the end of this film. There were 3 sheets, 3 pages of numbers and nothing else. No letters, no words, just numbers separated by commas, marching down the page in columns. The sheets are not lost. They were published, and you can read them tonight. One of the 3 has been solved, and later in this film, you will watch it open, number by number. The other 2 have never been publicly solved, and the treasure has never been reported recovered. Everything we know arrives through one door. In 1885, in Lynchburg, Virginia, a pamphlet went on sale for 50 cents. It was called The Beale Ciphers. Its author was anonymous. Its publisher was a man named James B. Ward. And there is no independent contemporaneous record, none, of the events it describes. So everything turns on those pages. The pamphlet may preserve a true account that nothing else wrote down. It may have invented the whole affair, or something in between may be true. Real ciphers, wrapped in an invented frame. Here is the story the pamphlet tells. In 1822, a man named Thomas J. Beale left an iron box in the keeping of a Lynchburg innkeeper named Robert Morris. A plain lidded strongbox, 1820s ironwork, no ornament, accepted on trust, with no witness outside the pamphlet's telling. Beale then wrote out of the story, and out of every record anyone has since searched. The box stayed behind. Beale's instructions came by letter, dated the 9th of May, 1822, written from St. Louis. Keep the box 10 years, Morris was told. If no one arrived with Beale's authority to claim it, open it. And there was a promise attached. A key had been left in the hands of a friend in St. Louis, sealed, addressed to Morris, endorsed not to be delivered until June 1832. A specific envelope, promised for a specific month. All the innkeeper had to do was wait. So picture June 1832, the month the sealed key was promised for. A month past the 10-year mark. It arrives on the calendar like any other. No writer, no envelope, nothing with his name on it. The month passes and the box stays shut. The pamphlet says he held on anyway, into the 1840s, waiting on a key that was now long overdue. Until, in 1845, 23 years after the letter from St. Louis, Robert Morris opened the box. Inside were letters and 3 sheets of paper covered in numbers. No key. The letters told a story, where the numbers came from, and what they guarded. The numbers themselves told nothing at all. They were a wall, and according to the letters, behind that wall lay a fortune that a party of men had carried across most of a continent. According to those letters, the years before 1822 had taken Beale far from Virginia. He and a party of men had ridden west on a hunting expedition, and somewhere north of Santa Fe, the story goes, they found gold. Gold and silver with it, in quantities that turned a hunting trip into something else entirely. The letters describe what the party did with it. They hauled the metal east, all the way home to Virginia, and buried it in Bedford County, in the country near a place called Buford's Tavern. at some point between roughly 1819 and 1821. Then they protected the secret the way careful men could, not with guards and not with a map, with mathematics. 3 ciphers with 3 separate jobs. The first sheet, the exact location of the deposit. The second, a full accounting of what was buried. The third, the names of the men in the party and their next of kin, the people meant to inherit if no one ever came back for the box. Location, contents, heirs, everything that mattered, split across 3 walls of numbers. Look closely at the pages, because they are stranger than any dramatization. Dense columns of numbers, separated by commas, line after line, filling each sheet. Nothing an eye can simply read. Without their keys, the 3 sheets are identical in the only way that counts. They are silent. Somewhere in those columns, if the letters are honest, is a hillside. Numbers pointing at something. But pointing at what? How those sheets traveled from an iron box to a printing press is the pamphlet's own story to tell, and it tells it anonymously. What is beyond dispute is the outcome. In 1885, 40 years after Morris opened the box, all 3 ciphers were published in Lynchburg, complete, every number in place, available to anyone in America with 50 cents and patience. Think about what that purchase offered. If the story inside was true, this was the cheapest treasure map ever sold. Everything required to locate more than 8,000 pounds of buried gold and silver. Printed on paper you could fold into a coat pocket. All a reader had to do was the one thing no reader has ever publicly done. Open sheet 1. And here is the turn that separates the Beale Ciphers from every other treasure legend in America. One of the 3 sheets has been solved, publicly, checkably. Sheet 2, the accounting of the treasure. That is where we go next. You are going to watch it open. Watch closely, because what makes sheet 2 work is exactly what the end of this film turns on. A book cipher is one of the oldest ideas in cryptography, and one of the most stubborn. 2 people agree on a text, any text, a novel, a speech, a founding document. To encrypt a message, you find a word in that text that begins with the letter you need, and you write down that word's position. Do it letter by letter, and your message becomes a list of numbers. That is the brutal elegance of the thing. The numbers alone contain nothing a stranger can pry open, because the pattern is not in the numbers. It lives in the key text, somewhere else entirely. Guess the right book, and the message falls out in minutes. Guess wrong, and you can stare at the page for a lifetime. The entire lock is one question: which text? For sheet 2, the answer was hiding in the most public text in America, the United States Declaration of Independence. Number every word of the Declaration in order. The first word is 1, the next is 2, and so on, straight through the document. Each number on Beale's second sheet points to one of those words, and each word surrenders a single letter. The rule is the first letter. Take a number from sheet 2. Count that many words into the declaration. Keep the first letter of the word you land on, and discard everything else. Then the next number, then the next. One number, one letter, down every column of the sheet, and slowly, out of pure arithmetic, a message begins to assemble itself. The first number on sheet 2 is 115. Count 115 words into the declaration, one word at a time, and the count stops on the word instituted. Take its first letter, I, and write it down. You have just recovered the first letter of a message that stayed hidden inside plain numbers for decades. The next number is 73. It lands on hold. H. Then 24. Another. A. 3 numbers in, and something has begun to speak. Then the 4th number stumbles. It lands on the word rule, and R, where the word, taking shape, have, needs a V. Further along, another lands on consent, where an I belongs. And the message reads through anyway, because real language is unmistakable, even through a few wrong letters. Sheet 2's opening decodes to, I have deposited in the county of Bedford, about 4 miles from Buford's. And it keeps going. Hold on to those wrong letters. They are not a flaw in the story. They are evidence. The strays are how researchers know exactly which text the maker used. A version of the Declaration of Independence that differs from the official transcript. Not the idea of the document, but a particular printed copy, imperfect in particular places. The message is unmistakable. The stray letters simply record which copy of the key its maker actually held. And what the message goes on to say is an inventory, a dry, specific accounting of what the party claimed to have deposited. Gold, approximately 2,921 pounds. Silver, approximately 5,100 pounds. Jewels besides, taken in exchange. What is that worth now? It moves with the gold price, and sources disagree. Modern press estimates have run roughly $43 to $60 million. Hold that range loosely, but hold this tightly. The pamphlet describing it sold for 50 cents. Understand what makes Sheet 2 different from a legend. You can check it. The pamphlet is scanned and public. The Internet Archive holds it. The declaration is public. Number the words yourself, follow the numbers yourself, and the inventory emerges under your own hands, strays and all. No expert standing between you and the result. And file this away. The fact that this particular key demonstrably works is going to matter again at the very end of this film. Now feel the shape of the trap the pamphlet leaves you in. Sheet 2 tells you, in verified plain English, exactly what the treasure is, to the pound. What it does not tell you is where. For that, you need Sheet 1, the location cipher. And so every reader who has ever finished Sheet 2 has done exactly what you would do. Reached for Sheet 1, carrying the one key already proven to be real. Take the declaration, numbered word by word, exactly as before. Apply it to Sheet 1, the same procedure that just worked on the neighboring page, and nothing comes out. No directions, no place names, no English. The letters land in a heap. The one key known to matter in this story slides into the neighboring lock, and it will not turn. Sheet 3 behaves the same way. The cipher said to hold the names, the men and their next of kin, the heirs to all of it, sits just as closed. And the logic that follows is irresistible, and generations have followed it. The maker used a famous public text once, so surely the other keys are out there. Some book, some speech, yet no proposed key and no claimed solution for either sheet has ever survived public scrutiny. Not once since they were published. Sit with the asymmetry, because the whole film lives inside it. 3 ciphers, presented as the work of the same hand, made by the same method, sealed in the same box. One opens cleanly and says something specific and checkable. Two will not open at all. Whatever you end up believing about this case, treasure or hoax, your explanation has to account for that split. Keep it in your pocket. We will need it at the end. And of course, some people decline to wait for sheet 1. If the gold is in Bedford County near Buford's Tavern, the letters say so, and the solved second sheet seems to vouch for the letters, then there has always been a shortcut available: a shovel. For more than a century, that is exactly what the hills of Bedford County got. We will come back to the holes. But before anyone digs another hole, an honest investigator has to walk back to the beginning and ask a colder question. Not which text opens sheet 1, but whether any of this happened at all. Every word of this story reaches us through one anonymous 50-cent document, published 63 years after the box was allegedly left at the inn. The case against is coming, and it is strong. Stay with it, because when it is fully built, we will find the one place it cannot reach. Start with the man himself, Thomas J. Beale, the adventurer who rode west, found a fortune, and trusted an innkeeper with the paperwork. Go looking for him outside the pamphlet, and he is not there. No independent documentary trace of Thomas J. Beale has ever been found. Not one. A man who allegedly led an expedition and moved 4 tons of metal across a continent, and the record keeps no sign of him. Absence alone is a weak weapon. Plenty of real people left thin records. So set the missing man aside and read what the pamphlet carries inside its own sentences. The letters are dated to the 1820s. That matters because language has layers, like soil. Words enter use at datable moments, and linguistic analysis can date those moments. Core sampling a text the way geologists core sample ground. A document truly written in the 1820s should be built entirely from 1820s words. 2 words failed the test. The letters use the word stampede and the word improvise. Linguistic analysis places both as not in use until the 1840s, roughly 20 years after the letters were supposedly written, sealed, and locked inside an iron box. A writer of the 1820s reaching for those words is a photograph with a wristwatch in it. The vocabulary comes from the wrong layer of time. There is no comfortable reading of that. If the letters contain 1840s vocabulary, then the letters were written in the 1840s or later by someone dating them backward. And notice what else belongs to the 1840s, the decade in which, according to the pamphlet, Robert Morris finally opened the box. The paperwork appears to have been composed after the story says it was sealed. The next test asks not when, but who. Every writer has habits, punctuation, grammar, the vocabulary they reuse without noticing, and compared statistically, those habits behave like handwriting. Compare the letters attributed to Thomas Beale against the 1885 pamphlet's own narration, and the similarities are strong. In punctuation, in grammar, in vocabulary. 2 voices, some 60 years apart, sounding like one voice. The attribution points at a specific name, James B. Ward, the publisher, the likely author of both the letters and the pamphlet around them. Notice that these are 2 different instruments pointing the same way. The vocabulary test says the letters are younger than their dates. The style test says the letters in the pamphlet share an author. Neither depends on the other. Each was run on the words alone. And both, independently, put the pen decades after the letter's own dates, and arguably in the same hand as the publication itself. Follow that to its end, and the story folds inward like a stage set. If Ward wrote the letters, then the box, the weight, and the Western expedition are scenes in a fiction. A Lynchburg publisher in 1885 composing an adventure, backdating its documents, wrapping it around 3 sheets of numbers, and selling it for 50 cents a copy. Not the record of a treasure, a product about one. For nearly a century, that is roughly where the argument stood. Suspicious vocabulary, suspicious style, and a man no record could find, set against the one thing none of it explains. A working cipher, flanked by 2 silent ones. Then, in 1980, a cryptographer decided to interrogate the silent sheets directly. Not the letters, not the prose, the numbers themselves. His name was Jim Gillogly, and what he found is the strangest single fact in this case. Gillogly published his 1980 paper, A Dissenting Opinion, and the experiment was simple to describe. Take sheet 1, the unsolved location cipher. Apply the one key known to matter in this story, the Declaration of Independence, numbered word by word, first letters kept. Exactly the procedure that opens sheet 2. The output should be meaningless. Random letters, noise. That is not what came out. In the middle of the decoded text, Gillogly found letters marching in near sequence, a pseudo-alphabetical run, sitting inside what should have been pure static. Noise does not alphabetize itself. Somewhere within the supposedly unreadable sheet 1, there was structure, and it was structure that only became visible through the Declaration of Independence. Gillogly did the mathematics. The odds of that run arising by chance, he calculated, are roughly 1 in 10 to the 13th power, 1 in 10 trillion. Write it out, and the number carries 13 zeros. Whatever else is true of sheet 1, that run is not an accident of arithmetic. Chance is off the table. Something put it there. The hoax reading of that run is blunt. Sheet 1 is not an unopened lock at all. It is a stage prop. Numbers generated out of the declaration by someone who never encoded a real message, with the alphabetical run left behind as manufacturing residue. In that reading, the location cipher cannot be opened because there is no location inside it. And while the analysts argued over the numbers, Bedford County was being dug. For more than a century, the ground near Buford's Tavern has been excavated again and again. Treasure hunters, generation after generation, pamphlet in one hand and shovel in the other. Period newspapers carried the hunts as news. In 1989, the hunt drew a professional. Mel Fisher, a treasure hunter by trade, ran his own search of the county. Here is the complete recovery record from all of it. Every documented dig across 100 years and more. Artifacts from the Civil War era. Objects decades younger than the alleged burial. And nothing else. Nothing matching sheet 2's inventory. Not an ounce of the 2,921 pounds of gold. Not an ounce of the 5,100 pounds of silver. No jewels. Nothing. So assemble the case against, because it is formidable. A single anonymous source. A hero no record can find. Letters dated to the 1820s that speak in 1840s vocabulary. Prose that statistically matches the man who published it. an unsolved cipher carrying a structure with 1 in 10 trillion odds of being accidental, and a century of holes holding nothing but the wrong war's relics. Any reasonable jury leans one way, and yet the verdict will not close, because one fact is still standing in its way, the fact this film promised you at the start. We are almost there. First, a strange wrinkle inside the prosecution's own star exhibit. Case closed then. Except the verdict will not quite close. Begin with the prosecution's star exhibit. Gillogli's alphabetical run, the 1 in 10 trillion string. It puts chance beyond serious argument. Something was constructed inside sheet 1. But look carefully at what it does not prove. It does not prove what was constructed, and it does not prove why. Because there is a second way to read those strings. Nick Pelling, an independent researcher who writes on ciphers at his site, Cipher Mysteries, has argued that the runs look less like the debris of a forgery and more like something deliberately embedded in sheet 1's ciphertext. One researcher's reading, not a peer-reviewed finding, and Pelling offers it as an observation, not a solution. But it is a serious observation, standing directly on Gillogli's own work. Take the observation for exactly what it is, one reader of the evidence, thinking in public, and notice what it does to the object in front of you. If the runs were embedded on purpose, then sheet 1 is not a pile of fraudulent numbers. It is architecture, structure built into the location cipher deliberately and surfaced only a century later. Not proof of anything, but a genuine deepening of the doubt. And here is the uncomfortable part. Gillogli's own number permits both readings. 1 in 10 trillion means the run did not happen by chance, and that is all it means. A careless hoaxer generating fake numbers from the declaration could leave such a run. So could a cipher maker embedding a deliberate marker. The same key you watched open sheet 2 leaves fingerprints inside the cipher that will not open, readable as fraud or as craft. 13 zeros of certainty that something was done on purpose, and no way, from the numbers alone, to say which. The wrinkle deepens the doubt. It resolves nothing. What nothing in this case has ever resolved comes now. Now strip away every doubt at once. About Beale, about Morris, about the letters and their dates. Assume the worst of all of it. What remains, untouched, is the fact this film promised you at the start. The working cipher. You watched it open. A real book cipher, keyed to the Declaration of Independence, decoding through a real, imperfect copy to a coherent inventory. Verifiable machinery sitting in the middle of an allegedly fake document. Every hoax theory has to walk past it, and none has ever comfortably put it away. Ask why a forger does that. A con needs the appearance of a cipher, not the reality. Arbitrary numbers would have looked identical to every reader in 1885, at a fraction of the labor. Instead, someone built a genuine encryption keyed to a specific public text and made it check out. One real lock between two doors that do not open. If this is a hoax, it carries craftsmanship it did not need. There is an answer available, and it deserves stating fairly. The working cipher is the hook. Solve one sheet in front of the reader, and the reader believes the other two can be solved. And belief is what sells pamphlets. That answer is coherent, but notice what kind of answer it is. A story about intent, with no document behind it. On the question of the one real lock, both sides are guessing. So hold the two ledgers side by side. Honestly. Against the treasure, One anonymous source, an undocumented hero, anachronistic vocabulary, stylometry pointing at the publisher, alphabetical ghosts in the cipher text, and 100 years of empty holes. Resisting easy dismissal. A genuine solved cipher anyone on Earth can verify. And, further down the ledger, one researcher's argument that the strings inside sheet 1 may be structure rather than debris. The scales move. They do not settle. Consider the ending where it is a hoax. Then in 1885, a Virginia publisher composed one of the most durable fictions in American history for a 50-cent cover price, and balanced its central puzzle so finely that cryptographers, linguists, and treasure hunters have stayed in its orbit for 140 years. Everything checkable would still be real. The printed tables, the working cipher, its flawed key. Only the story wrapped around them would be invented. The treasure would be imaginary. The achievement, whatever we choose to call it, would not. Now consider the ending where it is real. Then somewhere in the Bedford County foothills, near the site of Buford's Tavern, roughly 2,921 pounds of gold and 5,100 pounds of silver are still in the ground. Described in a cipher that has been read, located by a cipher that never has been, guarded by nothing except the fact that no one knows where to stand. And in that ending, remember, the answer was never meant to be hidden forever. Beale said a key existed, promised for June 1832. Not an unbreakable code, a lost letter. What would settle it is easy to name, and none of it has happened. A public solution of sheet 1 that survives scrutiny. One that names ground, and ground that answers. A documented recovery, or, for the hoax, a period record proving the pamphlet's composition. None of the three exists. The case sits precisely where 1885 left it, sharpened by analysis and settled by nothing. That is why this case will not resolve. A hoax should not contain a working cipher. A treasure should not come wrapped in backdated letters. Every explanation on offer has to swallow at least one fact that belongs to the other side. The Beale Ciphers are not a puzzle with a missing piece. They are two complete, contradictory pictures printed on the same 3 sheets of numbers. Somewhere behind it all stands a person we cannot see. Perhaps Thomas J. Beale, sealing the coordinates of a fortune into numbers, and then vanishing from every record a historian can check. Perhaps James B. Ward, alone at a desk with the Declaration of Independence, building a puzzle designed to outlive him. One of those two men certainly existed. Whether the other ever did, the numbers do not say. So the file stays open where it began. Lynchburg, Virginia, 1885. A 50-cent pamphlet, 3 sheets of numbers, 1 solved, 2 silent, and more than 8,000 claimed pounds of gold and silver that no one has ever reported finding. If sheet 1 ever opens, this file gets reopened with it. This has been the Static Files. Follow the Static Files for a new, unsolved case every week.